Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell Podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. We are pleased to be joined by none other than Casey Mears. How's it going, man?
Yeah, doing good. Doing good. How about you?
Doing well. Of course, you're going to be racing this weekend in COTA. Kind of tell us, talk a little bit about that.
Well, I got a good friend of ours, Jimmy Adams, who owns Featherlight Coaches. Over the years, obviously, buying coaches and dealing with that company, we've met and through motorsports, and actually have gotten to know each other a lot closer over the course of going to Sturgis over the last few years. He has a big presence out there, and a lot of friends gather and go and hang out in Sturgis for 2 or 3 weeks and have a good time. And last time we were out there, we talked about hopping in and doing a race with them, and COTA ended up being the one. So looking forward to it, coming off of, doing the Legends race this last weekend, and now getting to go do this race at COTA. I feel like I'm back on the circuit again, racing a couple of weeks in a row.
Yeah, for sure. Talk about what, I know you were in Mexico a couple of weeks, I think last week. How did that go? What was that experience like?
Yeah, that was super cool. So Michelle Jourdain, a guy that I used to race with in a handful of IndyCar races back in the late 90s, early 2000s, has created a series down in Mexico called Super Copa. And it's a great deal. He's had it for about 4 years now. It's kind of a spec class, it has like a LS motor in it with about 500 horsepower, paddle shift. It's like a TA2 car, more like a Trans Am car with like a Mercedes body on it. And it's a cool little series. They run on a Hoosier bias ply, which makes it real slick and slides around a lot. So it's a driver's series. The cars slide around quite a bit. But he got together with Rodrigo that runs the Mexican GP, and was able to put an event on called the Legends Cup, where he invited back a bunch of guys that we all raced together, like I said, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and put on a race. It was myself and Mark Blundell and Paul Tracy, Alex Tagliani, Michelle, Luis Diaz, Mario Dominguez, a bunch of guys that we used to race with back in the day, Max Pappas. And man, we had a blast. Racing F1 weekend was huge. I think they had about 350 people in the grandstands, which was just absolutely mind-blowing. And the passion of the Mexican fan is just amazing, especially with the F1 Red Bull driver being a local Mexican guy there. Man, they were just going absolutely nuts. So the energy was awesome. The whole event was great, and really had a good time.
I know you've been up to a lot of things. You've been racing a lot since you kind of stopped racing in NASCAR, but what have you been up to these past few years?
I would say number one, raising my kids. I've been very fortunate. I wasn't really done with motorsports when it was done for me, as far as a regular basis. But it was really a blessing in disguise. I've been spending a lot of time with my family, making a lot of baseball games, football games, go-kart races, cheer events, and that kind of thing, school events with my kids, which has been pretty special. But in between all that, I've done a handful of, Robbie Gordon's, that Super Truck series. I've done some races there and had a really good time. Jumped into a handful of sports car things. I've also done a couple Baja 1000s now in a trophy truck, once with Geyser Racing, and then another time with Robbie this last season. And those things are just absolutely a blast to drive. One of the coolest cars or vehicles I've ever driven. But yeah, just dabbling and stuff like that. We go out and play in the sand dunes. One thing we really enjoy with our side-by-sides, and, camping with friends, and now, moving from North Carolina and being in Arizona for the last 5 years, that's made a lot of that more possible. So really enjoying that.
Yeah. I got to ask you, have you seen, what are your thoughts on Ross Chastain's move on Sunday in Martinsville? Have you seen it?
Yeah. I think, I think it goes without saying, it was amazing, really. To pull something like that off. I think it's one thing, to have the mindset to decide this is something I'm going to try, two, to just do it, period, and get through it. But three, to decide to do it, pull it off, and make that last second pass to put himself into the Final Four. What a storybook, situation all the way around, and And I was fortunate enough to be teammates briefly with Ross in 2019 when we did the Daytona 500. I ended up getting taken out, but just talking to him and seeing how he approached what he did, I think that even at that point, you could tell he was really mature in the way that he drove and the way that he approached motorsports, and you could tell this kid was going to go somewhere if he ever got a real shot. And it's great to see him to get the opportunity that he's gotten, the last couple of years now, and to pull the success that he's had up to this point is pretty impressive. So this move was a big move, and everybody's talking about it. But I think the one thing about Ross is that the success that he's had prior to what's happened this weekend. He's way more than proven that he's a guy that is capable of winning the championship and winning races for a lot of years to come.
For sure. You kind of talk about like your time racing and all those years in NASCAR. What was the best moment you think from your time there? I don't know, it might not be over, but overall, what are your best things from there?
Right. Honestly, I would like to get back involved. I'm not done racing. I think racing at this Legends Cup this last weekend kind of retold myself again that, hey, this is something that I'm not really entirely done with. But I think it goes without saying that, obviously some of the highlights of my career were, one, winning the 600 was a really special moment. Another moment that was really special was sitting on the pole at the Brickyard.
Yeah.
All the success that my family's had there over the years, and to be able to do it in the fashion that we did with so much speed, setting a new track record. I mean, we were on the pole by a good bit, and that track record held for quite a long time. So that was special. But one thing that I look back on that's also special to me is just a lot of the relationships that I built over the years. I was in stock car racing or NASCAR for 15 years, and being able to be there on a weekly basis, work real hard with a lot of the great talented people that inside of motorsports to build a better car, make your car go faster, show up to the track when your car's off, work in 3 or 4 short sessions to get your car better, and then have a successful weekend. That challenge of being there week in and week out, and working with those guys to get your car faster so that you can go out and do your job was really rewarding. So dealing with sponsors and meeting people that I was so fortunate to fund a lot of my career, from top to bottom. It was really special when you look back at it. I think when you're in the mix and you got a gun to your head, just trying to put in the best lap week in and week out and do the best job you can, it's hard to really step back and from 1,000-foot view and appreciate where you're at, because you're so focused on doing your job. But now having a few years to be out of it and look back on a lot of those moments and understand really what you accomplished and what I was able to do. There's very few people that were in any top form of motorsports for 15 years, and I was one of those guys. So I feel I appreciate it quite a bit.
Yeah. And you just mentioned that you would want to return if you can. Is that something you want to do?
I'd love to. I don't know. Obviously those opportunities are few and far between. I've been out of the sport for quite a while now. I understand the realities of that, but man, if I could get into the truck series or do some Xfinity races, or possibly even get in a cup car again, maybe jumping in for road courses or something like that, I'd love to still be in the mix. I'm 44 years old. There's guys that have raced a lot older than I have.
Yeah.
I feel like it's funny because you look at things differently when you're younger, and you go, okay, hey, these young guys are coming in with a lot of initiative, a lot to prove. But there's a lot to be said for being smart about the sport and having a history in the sport and understanding, what these tracks do and where they go, and being at a track for multiple times in a row, having that experience. So, it's neat to see guys like Harvick still going out there and running well, and some of the older guys that are still putting numbers on the board, because at the end of the day, it's really about knowledge, and when to go hard and when not to go far fast. So, I think it'd be great. I'd love to be, part of it again in some fashion.
Usually this and this week is championship week, but it's also the last race of the season. I know you've been through this so many times, changing teams and last rides with things. I know obviously the biggest one this weekend is Kyle, his last ride with Joe Gibbs Racing, of course, M&M's leaving after 32 years. going through something like that, what was that like for you heading into those final races? What do you think that as someone that's went through it, being with teams and leaving them after that race, what's Kyle kind of going through this week, knowing that
Well,
this is last?
yeah, I would say that it's a lot of mixed emotions. I mean, obviously, excited about the next step. Bummed about leaving a program that you've been with for so long. But it also depends on heavily on what's going on internally. That always really dictated a lot of how I felt about those last few races of the season, knowing that you're moving on somewhere else. I was with some teams that just things weren't going well internally, and you kind of just couldn't wait for it to be over. There's other times that things were going really well and you were just moving on. So, trying to keep, the guys as positive as you can, knowing that, hey, instead of having the attitude that, hey, things are over and we're just kind of finishing this out, it was how can we finish this thing off the best we possibly can, and I think internally sitting down with the guys and just saying, hey, listen, I'm not giving up. I want to win races. It does nobody any good for us to just, run around mid-pack or in the back. And, we're going to approach the end of the season like it's the start of the season, and we're going to go as hard as we can. And those were a lot of the conversations I had, internally, and just wanted to let those guys know that there's no giving up in me. It was always going to be, one more opportunity to have a good result. And, keeping that morale, I think, is a big deal. But it's hard to do that when things are changing and people know that things are moving on. But it just depended on my scenario. I think when I was leaving Ganassi going to Hendrick, that was a really tough decision because Chip, gave me such a great opportunity to start my career. But going and driving for, a group like Hendrick was just way too hard to pass up. And so that was a tough decision to make, and there were some guys that were upset, that I was moving on, but also understood why. But then there was other times where, at Childress, it just disappeared. We had a pretty good season going when I was sponsored by the Jack Daniels car, and it was shortly after 2008. And, Jack Daniels notified us really, really late in the season. I think it might even have been November. It was really late that, hey, we're not returning for the following season. And they kind of utilized the 2008, downturn as a reason why they weren't going to come back. And it left us hanging, so that was totally different emotions. We're shocked, surprised. I think the whole team was turned upside down. And because actually it wasn't November, it was a little bit earlier than that, because they ended up kind of taking my crew apart and putting it with other people and trying to build for next year. And it really put us in a bad situation the last couple of races where we weren't going to be competitive. We didn't have the most current cars and that kind of thing. So that totally changes your mentality. So again, there's so many different scenarios, but I think a guy like Kyle and a team like Joe Gibbs Racing, I don't think there's any give up in either one of those guys. I'm sure there's going to be a wide range of emotions of, leaving guys that he's been with for a long time. But I don't see any quitting them. I think they're going to, push hard all the way through this last event.
Absolutely. What is RCR getting? And obviously you were teammates with Kyle for a year. What are they getting with Kyle?
Well, I think, I've actually gotten to know Kyle a lot better over the last few years than I had even when we were teammates. I think the Kyle that when we were teammates years and years ago is a lot different Kyle than it is today. And I wouldn't say from a talented standpoint, obviously the guy's got huge talent, but he's grown up a lot. He's a lot more mature in how he approaches things. When I was at Hendrick and Kyle was there, they were really trying to contain his emotions and obviously the talent was there, but working heavily on, trying to get everything around it, sorted. And these days he's, obviously older, he's got a family, he's got kids. I think he's thinking bigger picture. But I think without a doubt, they're going to get a huge talent that is going to bring a lot to Richard Childress Racing. He's a lot more mature in the way that he approaches things, obviously smarter about the business. So I think it's a huge asset that Richard's getting, and Kyle.
Yeah, for sure. And last thing is this weekend, of course, you're racing. What do you want to? Obviously, you want to go out and win, but what would be a good run for you over at COTA?
Honestly, winning. I think it's an interesting weekend. So Jimmy Adams, he's a great guy. We got a little bit of a test session. It's the first time I've ever been to COTA, so I've been getting a little bit of simulator time, which has been fun. But we have a test session on Thursday. I believe there's another session or two on Friday where I'll get in, and then he's going to have to qualify the car based on the rules. There's a couple sprint races that he's going to run on Saturday, and then there's an enduro that comes on Sunday where we split the car, and we're still trying to figure out. I think depending on how we both run on Thursday and Friday and Saturday will determine, who gets in the car first on Sunday. But it's an enduro event, where we split the race. And I think number one goal is to have fun, because that's what it's all about. But no doubt we're there to compete and have a strong run. So hopefully bring home a win.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Casey Mears, thank you so much. I know you gotta get going to COTA later on this afternoon. So thank you so much for coming on and talking with us, and best of luck this weekend.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate it. And one thing I would like to mention is that we're fortunate enough to have Camus come on board, the winery of Wagner Family Wines, and help us out a little bit. And those guys have had a long-standing relationship with them over the years, and always enjoy having them on the car.
Absolutely. We appreciate that as well.